Did you ever notice that in movie trailers, the text is often real grungy looking? It's got a lot of texture. It looks like it's printed on a wall with peeling paint. But in Final Cut Pro and other editing programs, the text is always so crisp and clean, it just doesn't look right. Well, I'm going to show you how to make textured text in Final Cut Pro. You can find all kinds of really cool textures online just by doing a simple Google search for something like ink texture. If you click on images, you'll get screenshots of all these different textures. You'll probably find a lot of them from stock image websites like Shutterstock, Getty Images, Adobe Stock. But you can still capture them by pressing Shift Command 4 on a Mac computer and selecting the area that you want to capture, or use the print screen button if you have a PC. This way you can capture the textures without having to bother registering or downloading. Try searching for other things like cracked paint, peeling paint, stone, rusty metal, or you could even take your own photos to use as a texture. After you import the textures that you found in Final Cut Pro, just add one to your timeline. Next, you'll have to create a text layer to use. Control T is the shortcut for basic title. And then up here in the inspector window, you can type in the text you want. And after you get it, select a font. It's really good to use a real thick, blocky one. I like Arial Black a lot. So you want nice, thick letters that really will show off the texture. Keep in mind that you can make each word a different size, and you can play around with the layout of this before you even get into the texture part of it. So now, my challenge is making this boring text look like this. Here's how. Open the effects browser and locate the effect called Image Mask. You might think that you need to apply this to the text, but you don't. You have to apply it to the background. Then, look in the inspector window and find this drop zone. A mask is like a cutout, and this drop zone is Final Cut asking you what you want to use to cut out this textured clip. You want to use the text layer that you've created, so just click on it and apply clip. Now when you click on the texture clip, it's cut out in the shape of your letters. You can reposition things by clicking on Offset Mask and dragging these sliders. This will change what part of the texture your text is over. I kind of like this part where the E is right by this bright spot. You can use the transform tool to reposition your title as well, or resize it if you like. You can still change the way this texture looks. Just click on the color correction tool here, and under exposure you can play around with the contrast, make the whole thing brighter. You can make it darker and more contrasty. And you can also use the color tab to change the color of the whole thing. You are not limited to just still images either. You could use video clips to add texture to your text, like this shot of flames. Just put it in your timeline, add an image mask to it in exactly the same way, click on the drop zone, click on your text, and voila! You have a cool flaming title. And like we did before, you can use the offset mask controls to position what part of the fire you want your letters to be over. Sometimes you'll find that it looks a lot better if you position the mask in a different area. Don't forget that you can color grade these as well. If you adjust the exposure and contrast and the color, you can make these backgrounds look really, really cool with a little bit of work. If you don't want to bother downloading textures, you can find a lot right here in Final Cut Pro if you look in the Generators tab. Look under Textures or Backgrounds, and you'll find a lot of different options. One of my favorites is this one called Metal. Now this default one, great, isn't very nice, but if you click up here in the inspector window on the published parameters, there's a whole bunch of different textures of metal. This one called copper is pretty cool looking, I think. Most Final Cut generators have a lot of different options hiding under the default like this. Let's see how this one looks with text. Add an image mask. In the inspector window, click on the drop zone, select your text in the timeline, and you have texture. Color grading is always a good idea. Play around with the contrast, brightness, and this is a pretty cool looking title. It's definitely better than the boring vanilla straight out of the box title we started with. You can even add keyframes to the offset mask control to make your text move across the texture. With just a little bit of time, you can end up with really cool one-of-a-kind titles. Hope this was helpful.